The year was 1939. The world was on the brink of collapse. The Soviet Union, a massive superpower, looked at its tiny neighbor Finland and decided it wanted more land. Stalin sent 500,000 soldiers. He sent thousands of tanks. He sent hundreds of planes. He expected Finland to fall in a week. He was wrong, because in the frozen forests of Finland, something was waiting. Not a monster, not a ghost, just a man. A farmer who stood barely 5 feet tall. His name was Simo Häyhä, but by the time the war was over, the Russians would give him a different name. A name that would make the bravest soldiers tremble in their boots. Deadliest, the White Death. Before the blood and the snow, Simo was a simple man. He lived in a small village near the border. He spent his days farming and hunting. He wasn't a loud man. He didn't talk much. He loved his dogs and his land. But Simo had a secret skill. He was a master of the rifle. In Finland, hunting isn't a hobby. It's a way of life. Simo could hit a target from hundreds of yards away. He didn't use fancy gadgets. He didn't have a high-tech scope. He just had his eyes, his breath, and a rifle that most people would call old. When the Soviet Union invaded, Simo didn't hesitate. He put on his white camouflage suit, grabbed his rifle, and walked into the forest. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to become the most successful sniper in history. The winter war was a nightmare. The temperature dropped to -40 degrees. It was so cold that grease froze inside the guns. It was so cold that if a soldier stopped moving for an hour, he would never wake up. The Soviet soldiers were not prepared. In the middle of the white snow, they looked like targets. Simo was different. He was a part of the snow. He wore a heavy white coat and a white mask. He would go out into the woods alone. No spotter, no backup. Just Simo and his bolt-action M2830 rifle. He would find a spot under a pine tree or behind a rock and wait. Sometimes he would wait for hours. Sometimes he would wait for days. How did one man kill over 500 soldiers in less than 100 days? It wasn't just luck, it was genius. Simo used tactics that snipers still study today. First, he never used a scope. Why? Because in the extreme cold, a glass scope can fog up. But more importantly, a scope reflects the sun. One tiny flash of light from a lens is enough to tell the enemy exactly where you are. Simo used iron sights, the simple metal notches on the gun. This meant he had to keep his head lower to the ground, making him an even smaller target. Second, he would pack the snow in front of his rifle. When a gun fires, the blast usually blows dust or loose snow into the air. That puff of snow is a dead giveaway for a sniper's position. Simo would pour water on the snow to turn it into ice, so nothing would move when he pulled the trigger. Third, and perhaps the most insane detail, Simo would keep a mouthful of snow in his mouth at all times. Why? Because at -40 degrees, your breath turns into a thick white cloud of steam. If Simo breathed out normally, the Russians would see the steam coming from the trees. The snow in his mouth kept his breath cold. He was a man who refused to even let his breath betray him. The Russians began to notice. One day, a squad would be walking through the forest. Suddenly, crack, the lead officer would fall. No one saw the shooter. No one heard where the shot came from. The soldiers would scramble for cover, but there was nowhere to hide. Crack, another man down. The Russians began to panic. They started calling him the White Death. They sent their own elite snipers to find him. Simo killed them all. They sent counter-snipers men trained specifically to kill other snipers. One by one, those men never returned. The Soviet command grew desperate. They began to order artillery strikes on entire sections of the forest. If they couldn't find the ghost, they would just burn the whole woods down. They carpet-bombed the area where they thought he was hiding. Trees exploded. The earth shook. The Russians waited for the smoke to clear, thinking he was finally dead. The next morning, the White Death was back. Crack. The Battle of Kala was where the legend became immortal. It was a small group of Finns against the massive Soviet wave. The Russians outnumbered the Finns 10-1. They had more ammo, more food, and more men. But the Finns had a saying, Kola kastaisi. Kola will hold. Simo was on the front lines every day. He wasn't just using his rifle anymore. When the Russians got too close, he switched to his Suomi KP-31 submachine gun. He was just as deadly with that as he was with his rifle. Some days he would take out 20 soldiers before lunch. His record in a single day was over 40 confirmed kills. The Russians began to believe he wasn't human. They thought he was a spirit of the forest that couldn't be killed. March 6, 1940. The luck of the White Death finally ran out. During a massive battle, a Soviet soldier spotted a movement in the trees. He fired an explosive bullet. It didn't miss. The bullet hit Simo directly in the lower jaw. The impact was devastating. The bullet exploded on contact. It tore away half of his face. His fellow soldiers found him lying in the snow. They said his face was missing. He was unconscious, covered in blood, and losing heat fast. They dragged him back to the camp. The doctors looked at him and shook their heads. "There is no way he survives this," they said. They put him in a pile of bodies, believing he was already gone. But then a soldier noticed a leg twitch. Simo was still fighting. Simo was in a coma for a week. Back in the forest, the war was ending. Finland and the Soviet Union were signing a peace treaty. On March 13, the very day the war officially ended, Simo Häyhä opened his eyes. He couldn't speak. His face was reconstructed with bone from his hip. He looked in the mirror and saw a different man, but he was alive. The war was over. Finland had lost land, but they had kept their independence. And it was largely because of men like Simo, who made the cost of invasion too high for Stalin to continue. You might think a man who killed so many people would be haunted. You might think he would be angry or broken. But Simo went back to his farm. He went back to his dogs. He became a successful moose hunter and a dog breeder. He lived a quiet, peaceful life. When people asked him if he felt regret for what he did, his answer was always simple. "I did what I was told to do as well as I could." He didn't see himself as a killer. He saw himself as a protector. He didn't hate the Russians. He just loved Finland more. Simo Häyhä lived to be 96 years old. He died in a veterans' nursing home in 2002. He survived the war, he survived an explosive bullet to the face, and he survived the test of time.